the most important thing to build a platform that developers want to use, and not a platform where developers are like, yeah, there's this other tool, let's give it a try, and yeah, it's quite okay. But by putting more and more focus on them, I think we can build better platforms.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 269, Using Human-Centered Computing in Platform Engineering. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darren and Victor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darren reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Victor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darren Pope and Victor Farsick. Victor, as developers, when we first start out writing our applications, where do we typically start? Unfortunately for me, it is, here's the code, start writing it. Should I talk to the user first that's going to actually be using the app? Would that make more sense?
When I was starting, back in the day, I was starting with animated GIFs.
Okay.
Right? Those animations of mail coming out of the letter or something like that, right?
You were AOL before AOL was, is what I'm hearing. It's just...
There we go.
Okay.
That was the thing. That's how you make it awesome.
So why are we talking about this? On today's show, we have Katharina Sick on. Katharina, how you doing?
Pretty good, thank you. It's nice to be here.
We brought up the thinking about the user because when you first started out in tech, you said you started out in human-centered computing.
Yeah.
And I asked, okay, what does that really mean? And you tried to explain it to me, and I tried to make it funny to get to this point. I failed horribly. For you, what did human-centered computing really mean?
I still think after the initial explanation before we started recording that she invented the name.
Okay. Actually, I know that's not true. I know it's a real thing, but it's not a thing that I ever did. So if you are like me and Victor, and it's like, what does this really mean? Katharina, the floor is yours.
Basically, what it means is like getting the user into the center of everything. So it is really, as said, if you start building an application in human-centered computing, you start to think of the user first. And actually, you not only make assumptions about what the user actually needs, but you can also go out and talk to them and actually ask them what they need. And we did small projects like that. And it's actually pretty interesting what just after 2 days of talking to the actual end users, how much that can improve your prototype and the thing you're planning to build by just finding out what people need. It sounds really obvious, but it really made a big shift for me when actually trying it out and seeing how much effect it has.
I guess that there is a big difference between the approach one can take depending on the scale, right? If you have a few hundred, a few thousand users, you can talk to a sample of them, a number of them. When it gets to millions, then probably it's not talking anymore, right? Like YouTube, right? They cannot talk to their users anymore because no matter how many users they talk, it's insignificant compared to the number of users they have.
Yeah, I totally agree that you need to adjust the things you're doing to the scale. But still, if you have like millions of users and if you get some of them and get their opinions, it's probably still way better than you just sitting here and making assumptions, not knowing about them. So we also did like one project for the public company transport in my hometown. And we just went out on the streets and asked like 2 or 3 of the hundreds of people using it. And already by that, we got like so many great inputs. And of course, you cannot go after every single need a user has, but you get great ideas by just talking. And of course, at a bigger scale, you need to adjust to doing that. But the nice thing about having informal conversations like we do is that people can actually bring in input that they are not directly asked for. And that was one of the big learnings for me back then.
Isn't that always true? That you said the phrase informal conversations. For the people that are fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, or that are back in an office, do you get more value out of going to meetings or going to lunch?
Probably lunch and coffee, as you say.
Exactly. It's like the meetings aren't necessarily helpful. So it's those serendipitous type moments. It's like, oh, by the way, did you think about this? And all of a sudden you're walking away and you stop. I went, wait, I can use that for this other thing.
Yeah, and from there, the head can just start spinning again.
So now you sort of moved on from the human-centered computing, or have you?
Yes, I have. I actually worked a few years as a developer, and with a lot of lucky coincidences, I ended up in the platform engineering team of Dynatrace. And I really, really enjoy what I'm doing here. So I really like building a platform that makes the daily life of developers at least hopefully easier. But I think with that background of having worked as a developer and also at least having spent some time focusing on human-centered computing, I have some nice new inputs in a world that is mostly dominated by people with operations background.
Now, to clarify, you're on the platform engineering team for Dynatrace. So what Dynatrace is using internally, correct?
Exactly.
Is there a difference when approaching users or those interviews that you mentioned, right? Trying to figure out what users need between internal platforms and externally facing users?
What actually is the nice thing about internal platforms is that everybody is so accessible. So I can just write people on Slack or schedule a Zoom call, ask if they have time for a coffee, or maybe just bump into a person I know from somewhere and having a chat with them. So for me, the big advantage of building an internal platform is just that it's so much easier to talk with people. It's so much easier to get feedback because everybody is just available. And at least in our case, it seems like developers are pretty motivated to use the platform to improve it. And they also have like ways to report feedback themselves without us even asking for it, which is a very nice thing.
Do your developers have a choice in using the platform or not using the platform?
With the platform we are building, we are still quite in an early phase. So not every, or at least very few people are using it now, as far as I know. I hope that they will have a choice in the future.
So if the platform is still very young, which is cool because everything goes through a birthing process, once you consider it mass scale, not necessarily mass scale, but large enough for mass consumption, I guess is what I'm trying to say. How many consumers would you have of the platform then? Hundreds? Thousands?
To be honest, I don't know. I'm just a platform engineer, so I'm not like in the management team planning all of that. I'm trying to always like push in the user's perspective, but I don't know what the final scale will be of our platform.
So let me rephrase it one more time because I was sort of leading into smaller numbers. You're probably not going to have the scale of 100,000 to 1 million.
No.
Because Dynatrace isn't that large, at least not that I'm aware of. So it's nice having sort of a bounded set of users. Even if you don't know how many exactly it is, it's not going to be YouTube scale. It's not going to be even Walmart scale, but bigger than your mom and pop website, like
Definitely.
Shopify site, right? It's going to be bigger than that. So does that help in having that constraint, knowing that I'm not trying to solve for the world, I'm trying to solve for us?
It does actually. And also like knowing that we want to solve problems for us is also knowing the culture we have in the company, knowing how people are solving problems at the moment. And I guess that's also one of the reasons why we decided to start with a very small set of services where we can talk to the people, where we can test if everything is working. And it definitely helps to have a smaller scale, I think.
Does it also help that I'm assuming not everybody has the exact type computer and not the exact same versions of everything, but there's probably, again, a bounding box of, okay, you probably don't have a whole lot of people using Brave or other, what I'll call fringe browsers to do work. They're probably using Chrome, they're probably using Microsoft Edge, and they're probably using Firefox and maybe Safari. Does that help?
I think so, but actually I'm one of those weird persons using like Vivaldi as a browser. So, and I know a few colleagues of mine using Brave. So by that, we already have quite a good sample in our team.
So you already shot me down, and that's good. I guess what I mean is you're not really going to be dealing with the mass public. There's still a reasonable bounding box. And if you have somebody that's only one person out of the 100 that are using the service is having a problem, probably that one person needs to conform.
Here's a problem with platform engineering compared to external user-facing something, applications, right? The scope is smaller in terms of number of people, right? We're not talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of people, much smaller numbers, but the number of interfaces is actually greater. Because I can reasonably expect that external user is going to use a browser, right? That's how we deliver applications. Maybe a phone, and that's it. For internal users, it could be CLI, it could be Visual Studio Code, it can be IntelliJ, it could be browser, right? Actually, from certain perspective, it's actually broader scope than when it's external. Or am I completely off here?
I totally agree with you. And that's actually what makes platform engineering so interesting for me. Like I'm for months now wrapping my head around how can we support all of that? How can we like provide a good way no matter what the developer using the platform now is using? And how can we help them to enjoy using the platform? Because if I go ahead and tell everybody, hey, you have to use this IDE with exactly those plugins, those tools, you're going to have to use this browser, whatever, doesn't matter, probably nobody's going to like using the platform. But on the other hand, we need to find ways to standardize things and to help them work productively. And I think this is a really, really interesting problem that we are trying to solve, at least.
What does a day in the life of Katharina look like?
Yeah, for me, it's like in our team, we're working a lot with Backstage and Crossplane. So we're really focused on developer experience. It's probably implementing a small thing in Backstage. Fixing bugs is unfortunately also a big part of my days. We also have some CI infrastructure that we are maintaining. So as we have quite a lot of teams, we have for years now a CI infrastructure with like 40 Jenkins instances, Gradle caches, Sonar cubes, everything you need around building your artifacts. And we are also still maintaining this one and trying to make it configurable for each team that is using it. I would say my day is very diverse. It really depends on the tasks we are currently having. Are we focusing on improving the CI infrastructure? Are we focusing on developer experience today? Do we have some bugs to fix, some developers to support? It really changes each day, and I'm also happy about that.
But are you? Every day you enjoy things just changing out from underneath you, going from one day you're dealing with Backstage issues to now you're dealing with, because you named them, I'm going to name them too. You're dealing with Crossplane issues, and maybe you're dealing with Jenkins issues. That makes you happy?
Dealing with the issues doesn't make me that happy, but like implementing new features and seeing lots of perspectives is the things that make me happy. And luckily, it doesn't change on a daily basis. It always depends on our goal for the current sprints or for a few sprints. And then we are shifting focus a bit again because we have quite a lot of topics.
You brought up sprints. What does a sprint look like for you? Is it 1 week, 2 weeks?
2 weeks it is for us.
Okay. And then what's expected out of each of your sprints?
Just as I think most of the people, we have planning in the beginning. We agree on how much we think we can achieve. And at the end of the sprint, hopefully we achieve lots of it, also depending on how many issues are coming up in between. But yeah, the expected thing is to have something that's nice to show at the end of the sprint and to have achieved something.
How successful are you at doing that with every sprint?
For me personally, it depends. I have like 2 or 3 colleagues who are like really high performers in that, and I would love to be like them. They are amazing. But for me, especially since I started like joining things like this podcast, doing public speaking, it's getting a bit harder to manage finishing my sprint actually. But I learned to take less, to also have time to help colleagues, to help developers and so on. And by that, it's getting more successful again.
When you're talking to users today and trying to figure out, okay, we had this coffee, this idea came out, whatever the idea may have been, how long can that user expect for that idea to come to life in broad strokes? Is it months, quarters? How does it work within your group?
It actually really, really depends. So what we do for all ideas is we discuss it internally with the team. We also very often involve the architects to get their opinions, to maybe even get better ideas out of the idea we just had. And if it's a low-hanging fruit, if it's something easy to do, it might even be the next sprint or maybe 1 month later. If it's a bigger thing, it might take a few months. Yeah, really depends on the scope and on how urgent we need it.
Does your team ever skip a sprint? Like, is there planned times to where, okay, right now for this sprint, we're A, going to do nothing because we're all just going to go take a break. B, we are dealing with technical debt, so that's going to be this sprint. How do you manage your sprints?
At least since I'm here, which is about 3 years now, if I remember correctly, we haven't done that. But what we do for those maintenance and technical debt related things is we simply plan these things. So if somebody in the team says, hey, look, we have a problem here, or we might have a problem soon, we are going ahead, we are planning the story, and we're just doing it because it's important to not move this ahead of us for too long.
Do you have a product owner for your platform?
Yes, we have. So our platform is actually built by multiple teams, and each team of those has a product owner. But we also have kind of a product owner, which is called execution lead, like very vaguely. But yeah, we have product owners in the smaller teams and like in the bigger scope as well.
So let me ask you this question. If you could be the product owner of the product owners, like you own the whole thing, what would you do different?
That's a good question, actually. I really would do is like focusing on developers even more. Maybe it's because of my background, I'm even focusing too much on that. That could very well be. But for me, it's just actually the most important thing to build a platform that developers want to use, and not a platform where developers are like, yeah, there's this other tool, let's give it a try, and yeah, it's quite okay. But by putting more and more focus on them, I think we can build better platforms.
So you're saying, and again, everybody's going to start hopefully laughing at this, we should be focusing on the people that are actually going to be using our software instead of just building what we want and doing it the way we want to do it?
Yes, in my ideal dream world, we should do that.
Why is that so hard for us?
Very often we approach a problem and then we think, yeah, that's how I'm seeing it, so I'm going to do it like that because it's the most obvious thing. But maybe it's only the most obvious thing for me and not for others, not for the people that actually have a different background that are using the problem or that are using the things I'm building.
Curious thing to me is that you explained earlier how it is so easier to reach users when we're talking about internal developer platforms or something like that than external users because you know where they are. They're your colleagues, right? They're in the same building or in the same meeting and so on and so forth. Everything is so much easier when users are concerned when talking about internal tools. Yet that's completely opposite, in my experience, from what companies do. And I feel that might be due to some historical reasons from the past, but I very often don't see that. I don't see that focus on users, but hey, we're going to build this thingy and everybody's going to like it. And you just need to give me 4 months and it's going to be there. That's the approach I see more often than any other, right? Completely ignoring users which happen to be sitting next door.
Same for me, actually. I also observed this a lot. And 2 or 3 years back, there has been a Reddit post which said like, hey, we've spent months on building this platform and now developers are hated and I don't understand why. And actually, I think that they built it exactly in the way you described, like sitting in a small room, isolated for months, building what they think is cool. Maybe also, like, I have to be careful about that as well, but getting in all the tools that they believe is cool and that they want to learn. And then you're throwing it over the wall to the developer. And yeah, it's kind of obvious that this will not work, but still we are repeating and repeating it over and over again.
It seems like we would have caught on to that problem by now. But I guess we're doomed to repeat our failures.
How often do those teams even realize that they're failing? Because, and this is going back to Danny's question from before, right? Very often developers do not have a choice whether they can use that thing or no. They have to. It's mandatory, right? And then if everybody has to use something, then you might easily get a false impression that that's a success, right? Everybody's using this. That's the definition of success, right? I built this, everybody's using this. You cannot get more successful than that if you ignore the fact that actually people are forced to use it.
But don't you think you would still notice that by getting a lot of bugs, getting a lot of support requests where people need help to achieve the simplest tasks?
Probably, assuming that you care about those.
I hope you do.
Yeah, but what is the motivation? If I'm a developer, right, and somebody forces me to do it certain way, like, hey, you need to use IntelliJ instead of VS Code. I'm simplifying it now, right? I'm most likely not going to create any request. Why would I create a request for something that where I obviously had no influence to begin with?
True, that's a good point.
So you as a platform engineer, you might never get a request from me, right? Because I have no feeling that my words or impressions matter in the first place.
Good point. I was more thinking in the direction of like doing deployments or actually completing tasks on the platform where you would probably fail or need help if it's not well built. But true, the problem actually starts way earlier, as you just said.
So if you have an unhappy developer community, if you have an unhappy operations community, then why did you bother building what you built? Is that the overall thought here?
Sounds good, I think.
Well, it doesn't sound good. It just unfortunately sounds realistic.
Yes.
So I have a poking question to ask. I'm assuming you have some APM built into your system, just for understanding what's going on. I am assuming you are not using your competitors' products.
That's true. We are using Dynatrace to monitor everything.
Okay. So how does that play out when there is something that you find as the platform engineering team that's serving Dynatrace? And it would be like, man, it would be really great if we had X. How do you feed that back into the overall company so that you can consume? Right? Because basically, Dynatrace is part of your platform. It's really bad inception. The Dynatrace developer platform is made up partially of Dynatrace.
Yes.
And Backstage and Jenkins and Crossplane and whatever else. Right? All these things matter. So what's it like when you, being an internal customer of Dynatrace itself, what happens when you send a ticket over? It's like, hey, we need this.
Actually, the cool thing is everybody is very open for feedback in that regard. So one of the reasons we are using Dynatrace that heavily internally is to get like feedback from ourselves as well. So we are drinking our own champagne basically. But people are really living up to that. So there are lots of Slack threads, and Slack channels and so on, where you can really report feedback. And I did that already in the past, and I felt like it was very well received. So that's actually a thing I like a lot about working here. Yeah, so feeding things back in works quite well.
Apart from speaking with your customers, your end users, developers in a company, right? How much can you incur of how well you're doing or not, how much you're fulfilling the requests or not through data itself. Imagine you cannot speak with them for some reason or another. How much of the understanding of their needs you can get from data itself, from their usage of whatever you're building?
I think a lot, actually. We have talked about that recently, and unfortunately, we don't have anything like that yet. But I think alone, how many users are returning to your platform, at least if it's not mandatory to use it, is a great measure of measuring the success. Also, what you can do is how many successful deployments on the platform have been, or how long did it take people to actually from the first time interacting with the platform to deploying their first app. And you can get all of that out of data. For example, also we are working a lot with backstage templates. So we also want to get some better observability in there to see hey, how long did template runs take? How often did they complete actually? Or how often did users cancel in the middle because they were frustrated getting this and that input or whatever? What do people need to do after this template was executed? And did they continue doing it, or did they just stop caring because they got annoyed for some reason? I think with that data, of course, also depending on what your platform is doing and how users should interact with it. But I think by observing these flows and getting how far do users get with it, how long does it take them, and how successful are they, you can get a lot of data without talking to people as well. Which is also nice because with that you can set more measurable goals than I want people to tell me that they are happy.
But does happiness really matter in what we do?
Maybe not happiness. Somebody will not be more happy in their personal life because I'm building a good platform. But what I think matters is that people like coming to work and that they have good tools to work with so that they can actually focus on what they want to do. So getting features into production, maybe fixing bugs, which is probably not the thing you want to do, but sometimes have to. And it was also for me, I'm now super interested in all this DevOps, cloud native, platform engineering related things. But back then when I was a developer, I couldn't care less about it. To be honest, I wanted to do my pull request, get my review, learn from the review, merge it, adjust it. And that was it for me. I couldn't care less about how my mobile application actually reached the Play Store or the App Store. And I think there are not just developers like me back then. There are also developers who have a lot of interest in that. And we need to get both into the boat somehow, I think.
You bring up a really interesting point that a lot of people gloss over. We're living supposedly in this age of shift left. But the way that you just spelled it out, I want to get my code, I want to review my PR, I want to get it merged, I'm done, move on to the next thing. As you said, you could care less about how that got to the app stores or anything else. Why does it seem like management believes that shift left is going to solve all of that?
What I really think is good about shifting left is that also back then when I needed some infrastructure, I had to create a ticket for operations, wait a bit to get it resolved. Probably they're asking for something, I'm on vacation, it takes even longer, and it was a pretty annoying workflow. And I think that shifting left is not about, hey, suddenly the developer has to do everything. I think that shifting left is just about giving the developer the capabilities to achieve their tasks on their own, but of course supporting them with a good system that helps that and offers them the capabilities that they want to solve, or the problems they want to solve.
Now, see, to me, that is a very sane definition of shift left. However, I think the shift left definition that we get most of the time is the developers do it all from cradle to grave. Don't bother anybody else.
But the curious thing about shift left is that that's something that was happening for non-technical users for decades now, right? If you're a mom and you want to shop, things shifted left for you, right? You're not opening issues to Amazon. You're not sending them emails. You just go there, you pick your shoes, you click a button, and it gets to your home, right? That's shift left. And somehow that was and still is, in a way, more acceptable for non-technical people than for technical people. And that's the thing that puzzles me, because I always imagined that software engineers would be more receptive towards that than non-engineers. It makes more sense that a developer is more keen, more enthusiastic towards shifting left than my mom, while in reality it's the other way around.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, and it's really interesting point. Maybe it is because developers, when you say shifting left in a company, many are really thinking about this, hey, let's shift all the things to the developers, let's let them do all the things themselves. But that is also very often related to like learning a lot of things, in addition to already knowing how to write applications, how to do all the coding, which is already quite hard to do. And then you need to learn Kubernetes on top, and you need to learn that and this on top. And actually, I think shifting left is not about like letting developers learn everything and let them do it, but more, as you said, clicking a button on Amazon, getting the things they want, and that's it.
How long is it going to take us to get to the Amazon level of actually being able to do shift left the right way?
I can't tell. Probably longer than we are thinking, but hopefully a few years.
Ooh, boy, I think that's pretty aggressive. A few years? I'm thinking a few decades still.
I'm a very optimistic person, so probably that's shining through.
I'm pretty optimistic that it's going to take a few decades.
Yeah, true.
So let me ask this question. In your platform, do you also include the runtime environments, or are those segregated out from the platform?
We are starting to, actually. So we have started to work with Gitpod, which basically provides cloud development environments. I think that this is going to be a big topic soon, but at the moment it's not included.
So that's I'm going to call that the left side of runtime environments. I'm talking about the actual application runtime environments. Is the goal for your platform to be more Heroku-like, to where here's my app? It could be a container image, it could be a zip file, it could be whatever, it doesn't matter. Go run it. And then the platform takes over. Is that what your long-term goal is?
At least I'm hoping that this is what we will achieve in the future. As said, I'm not that much included into long-term planning, so I can't tell exactly. But for me personally, that would be the definition of a successful platform. Like, hey, here's the code, run it for me. And if there are problems, tell me and let me fix it.
Well, that's the Amazon one-click, right? Here's my code, go run it. And the platform itself would figure out what to do. As a developer, I wouldn't care, because people like Katharina have done the heavy lifting for me.
At least for me, that would be the ideal scenario. Of course, you need to be careful of not hiding too much relevant information. Like, people must be aware if there is any network latency, for example, where their code is running, or if there are any problems with, I don't know, let's say multi-threading or something like that. So people need to be aware of the environment the platform is deploying the code to, in my opinion, so that they can build like also good applications adjusted to that, and that they can avoid problems that will happen. But still, for me, the ideal situation would be giving it away the code, getting it deployed, and be happy about it.
If you only had access to an enterprise-grade APM that you're probably not paying any money for to be able to get that data, that would just be amazing.
Exactly.
You have to admit, building a platform inside Dynatrace or any of your competitors, that has to give you a leg up, because it's literally, hopefully, not costing the team any money to have that level of analytics that us common folk have to go get third and fourth and fifth mortgages on our house to pay each month.
Yeah, it's actually great. So we can use like anything of Dynatrace that we want, or we actually should use, because then we can give feedback again. And it's great to have it and to just not think about it, to be honest, and to just include it everywhere.
But that's also probably the downside too, because I imagine there have been people coming from Dynatrace competitors to come work for Dynatrace, and vice versa. There's always people moving around in the spaces. No matter which, by the way, this is a hot tip for anybody listening. Once you get into a space, more than likely, if you leave the company that you're at, you're probably going to go to another competitor. That's what I've seen a lot. Doesn't matter. If you're in banking and you work at Bank A and you decide to leave Bank A, you're probably going to Bank B. Right? That's just sort of the standard thing. So inside, and I'm assuming you've been at Dynatrace for, you said 3-ish years, correct?
Yes.
What is the one Dynatrace product that you're using right now inside the platform that you initially thought, I don't know, to holy cow, if we didn't have this, we wouldn't be able to do this to the level that we're doing it?
Actually, since I have joined the team, we have been using Dynatrace quite heavily for everything. So what we are doing, it's basically also part of our definition of done to make things observable. And it has never been like in the question if we're using Dynatrace or something else, because Dynatrace is just readily here. It has all our data inside. And also, I'm not directly working with people coming from any competitors. So for me, it's a very general answer. I'm sorry for that. But for me, it's kind of like the whole tool. But we are like always exploring new features of it. At the moment, we're working quite a lot with workflows, which can help us a lot for our automations, which is pretty cool right now. But we still have to get like fully into that in our team. But basically, it's really everything. So for each new thing we're doing, we are discovering like something new, or very often we're discovering something new, which is a great thing.
What's one of those new things you've recently discovered?
Yeah, it's, for example, those workflows I mentioned, which are basically let you do automations and run them. And they help us a lot because for us, we're doing backstage templates. And sometimes or very often actually, we reach the limits of what the workflow engine can do. So what we're doing at the moment is we're taking a look on how we can like combine this with Dynatrace workflows and how we can improve that. That's a pretty interesting challenge at the moment.
What has your experience with Backstage been like?
Actually, quite good, I would say. So I really enjoy working with it, but also what I have learned since we're using it is that you need to customize it a lot. So you cannot just go ahead, deploy Backstage and say, hey, use it, I'm done with this. This is simply something that doesn't work. At least it doesn't for us. So it sounds so easy to use it in the beginning. But actually, when you're running it and when people are using it and when you really want to understand them, what is going on, it's pretty hard to do and actually needs lots of thoughts.
Does it require a lot of care and feeding as well?
Yes, actually, we're caring about it a lot and also working with it a lot.
Given a choice, would you have chosen Backstage again?
Probably yes. At least I'm a huge fan of open source. I also like how well you can customize Backstage and extend it and adjust it to your needs. But it's a hard thing to do.
It's that very tight rope of customizing it to everything I need versus let me just build something from scratch. Because at some point, you'll have to upgrade Backstage Core, which may break your extensions that you wrote or plugins that you wrote for Backstage. That then puts you into a cycle of that now breaks the core, that then breaks versus just let me write my own thing. Where do we make that decision? Like, do we always start with something off the shelf? Should we always start with something off the shelf? My gut answer is yes, but we have to be willing to also put that out to pasture quick.
Yeah. It's also for us, we've written a couple of plugins and we invest quite a lot of work to keep them up to date and to always keep Backstage updated. A problem for us is if like others are not updating or keeping their plugins up to date. Luckily for Backstage, that's not that much of a problem. We only have one plugin where we are facing that problem. But yeah, also in the past, we had a self-built tool which was called the Initializer, which basically did what Backstage templating is doing. And it was running for, I think, only 1.5 years or something like that. And then Backstage came up. And we immediately decided to switch to that because it's like it integrates in our platform much better. And yeah, templating is much better documented, and also the flow is much better, in my opinion, than what we have built. So for us, the decision to switch to an off-the-shelf solution was quite easy for that one.
When you say you keep Backstage upgraded, what does that mean in your world?
Yeah, basically, after there has been an update of Backstage, right now it's taking us a tiny bit longer because the out system has changed. But we're trying to update a few days or latest 1 or 2 weeks later. We are having Renovate running, and most of the times everything is working automatically. And if it requires some work, we also do it as soon as possible, so that we always have the latest features. We also read the changelog a lot, so that we know if something new is going on that could improve how we are using it. And we're really trying to stay up to date.
So it sounds like to me you are committed to using Backstage in such a way that it is critical to your infrastructure versus somebody that installed Backstage and has let it just rot on the vine.
Yeah, that sums it up good.
Isn't that how everybody should treat all of the tools that they bring into their shop?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's also like a platform is made up of so many tools. And if we are not able to trust every single tool that is in this platform, how can we trust the whole platform actually? I recently had this discussion. I'm in my free time taking a look at Falco right now. And it's a pretty cool tool, but you also must not forget to add monitoring or observability for Falco. Because what if Falco is not working anymore and you don't notice it and you don't get any security events? So I really think it's important that we are able to trust every component, no matter how little it is, in our platform, to trust the whole thing.
Because if you're incapable of committing to the tools you're using, how can we expect your users to be committed?
Exactly.
It would be very, and yet it happens very often, right? But it would be very contradictory, right?
It's very contradictory because we want people to use our stuff, but yet we're not willing to use other people's stuff when they ship their new things. So how can we expect somebody to take on what we're providing them? Yeah, that makes total sense. We're trying to be too logical here today. So that's the problem. That's not what we're good at. We're trying to be logical. So it sounds very interesting at Dynatrace. Are you guys hiring? I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, we are actually.
What does it look like working at Dynatrace? They send the limo to your house every day with fresh coffee. Is that what it's like?
Yeah, exactly. And don't forget the ice cream you get every day as well.
Oh, okay, good. Is it chocolate or is it vanilla?
Strawberry.
So not even, okay, well, I can't work there. I don't like strawberry ice cream.
No, but I think it really depends where you're working at Dynatrace. We are such a big company, so we have lots of departments you can work in. And for me, I really enjoy working here. Yeah, no coffee being sent to our homes, but going to the barista is nice as well.
So all of Katharina's contact information is going to be down in the episode description. Katharina, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.